Hi, and welcome back to another educational episode of Mr. Rodder's Neighborhood. Today we're going to get back to what we were doing with our roller rockers.
Not roller rockers, just regular rockers.
After our Gliptol event with the valve covers, we had to clearance our rocker stands on the cylinder heads for some clearance around the stand itself and the shims that we'd placed on the rockers. So to do such, I had opened a can of worms by by assembling the heads and everything. Originally, I was kind of just slamming it together till I realized that the rockers were way off center, and so they required shimming, and then that opened a can of worms with making the rockers work with those different rocker shafts. And now we're on to what we should have done probably a year and a half ago, but it's all about clearancing the rocker stands. We noticed that it's up against the rocker stands, like I said, on number 1 and number 8 cylinders. But what I've done here is I pulled the head. I had to clean off all the assembly lube that I had put on them because I didn't want them to collect all of the I didn't want the cylinder heads to collect all the metal shavings, and they're hard as hell to get off. So I went through and cleaned the cylinder heads, disassembled them and cleaned them, and then mounted just a stock rocker shaft on there with the hold downs that I'm going to use with our rocker shafts that we've completed here on the show. And I got it all set up now for everyone to pretty much see. So we'll go ahead and jump into that. Let me flip the camera around and I'll give you a bird's eye view of, well, not necessarily a bird's eye view, an up-close view of what's really going on with these rockers or the rocker stands and why I have to clearance them. Okay, here we are at our basic setup table. This is with the table I like to do fabrication stuff on, just to keep it away from everything else. I try to keep the mess down. But as you can see, I got the rocker shaft mounted on there. It's just a stock rocker shaft, which is virtually the same size as the other shaft. This one's a little beat up, so I'm not too concerned about hitting it or nicking it. I was planning on just throwing it in the trash anyway, but since it is straight, we'll use it for this project. And if I do hit it, no big deal. They were going in the trash anyway. But what I've done is I've taken our capture device that we got from TA Performance. It's made for their roller rockers, and I held I bolted them down. And I got the rocker shaft held into place, and the bolts torqued down to the spec that you use, which is 35 foot-pounds for a Buick rocker. And that way the cap is spread out to exactly where it's going to be used, so you can see any clearance issues. So the first rocker here, I've already thrown a couple of the shims on that we used on our other rockers that were left over from the rocker arms. That have already been honed out to fit around the shaft. Now, they don't fit on this shaft perfectly like the other one because they were virtually cut for the other shaft. But if you look, okay, so the big problem is this down here. All right, so let me see if I can get the camera in place. If you look, this side of the shaft, which you just have a rocker hanging off the end here, there's quite a bit of clearance there. And I'll get a flashlight out so everyone can see. There's quite a bit of clearance between the rocker shaft, or the stand, and the shim. Now, if I press the shim up against the capturing device, let me get another hand here. There's plenty of clearance. Sorry about that. On the rocker, you can see there that there's probably at least 60 to 80 thousandths clearance there. So that's definitely not a problem. Now on this side, you can see that the shim is not all the way up against the capture device, and that's because it's actually hitting the stand down here at the bottom. And that was what our problem was. That's why the rocker wasn't sitting straight. That's why everything wasn't lining up as originally intended. Excuse me. And so what I decided to do is to put it up like this. I kind of have an idea of how much I have to clearance that. Now, if you go nuts on this thing, you're probably going to affect the strength and structural rigidity of that stand itself. But in this case, what we're going to try to do is take it easy and go slow, right? Now I have a carbide burr on there, which is actually going to chew it up pretty quick. But then what you do is, if it makes any sharp indentions, that's a place for it to crack or break. So the idea is to smooth those indentions out. Also, what I've done here is I got a feeler gauge, and this is 62 thousandths of clearance. And you can see that it barely fits in there. It fits nice and snug. So we actually got to take about 62 thousandths of clearance out of off that stand. So just at a bare minimum, that shim will fit up against the capturing device evenly. And then that'll allow us to properly shim our rockers. So I have it set up to where we can do each individual stand, but if you look at this one, it's really far off center from the factory. I imagine this is just a casting thing. I don't think I've ever seen anything that far off, but this is not something that's an exact, it needs an exact measurement. It just has to hold the rocker, or the rocker shaft in this case. Now, if you look at the other ones, they're not near as bad. They're more or less centered. And that's why it was just on that one stand where I was seeing the big issues. Now, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and do the same thing for each individual one to verify we have some clearance in there. I'm hoping to have at least 20 to 40 thousandths worth of clearance. That would be fine. But in the case of this one here, it's gonna have to get done if I want the rocker to fit on there correctly and not bind. So that's what we're gonna do today. The tools I'm gonna be using is just your regular air-powered rotary tool here with a carbide burr file on it. They're just a cheap set off of probably Amazon or eBay. And I also have this is part of a head porting kit, but your sandpaper roll on a bit that fits directly into this air-powered rotary tool. But first things first, we're going to have to clearance that rocker or that rocker stand, and see what we can do about smoothing it out afterwards. So bear with me, and we'll get started. Okay, so first things first, there is gonna be metal shavings flying, so you're gonna want some safety glasses. These are probably about the worst I could possibly have, because I've scuffed them up so much you can hardly see through them. But I'll clean them off a bit and see what I can do. You know, the basic shop clean off with whatever's on my shirt is probably gonna end up on here. And then since we already have the shims on there, I figured the easiest thing to do is go ahead and just pull the shim back. Now, there isn't a lot of room. Like I said, these weren't really cut for this shaft. And we'll just go ahead and take that dude off so it doesn't fall. But we're definitely wanting to get in here behind this, on the back side of this rocker shaft, and see how much room we can open up without going nuts. to get what they would consider like a sharp edge in there, because it will create a spot for it to crack and break. All right, so back to fitment.
5 minutes later.
Okay. Now let's see where we're at. Now we're getting really close. The gap in here is probably less than 10 thousandths. Let me see if I can get your camera down there to even see. I don't think it's going to be a factor where you can't see. Not with this stand on it. All right, so big deal. We're going to clearance it just a little bit more. It is going to take, a little while to do this, and I didn't expect it to be fast at all, to be honest with you, but I think the best thing to do now is I get another Sharpie and I mark the area where I'm focused. All right, now to disassemble it again. You can see how this eats up a lot of time when you're building something completely custom or that never was. It's all about test, assemble, test, fit, and repeat. There's no fast way about it. It eats up a lot of time doing this, and it's never really anything that's this is not hard work at all. It's just repetitive and a little frustrating when you put all the time and effort into it thinking that you're going to get it right and it's not even close. So you got to take it all off and do it again. But it all pays off in the end. You have a lot less broken parts. Well, I do appreciate y'all coming along for the ride. I know it's normally I have one of these out every day, but I end up having to spend the rest of the day yesterday just getting the head cleaned up and on there. Or off the motor, I guess I should say. Off the motor, disassembled and cleaned up. Okay. Now it is sitting flush. I can't see if there's any room in between. All right. I would say no, it's hitting. Just a bit. how this is done and what it really takes and how much of a pain in the butt it can be. Like I said, it's all about trial, fit, use, and logic. Because I mean, if I did this without torquing them down, guaranteed I'd put it back together and it would hit again. It's just learning how to cut the corners or identify the mistakes that you're going to make, because there is a lot that you can make, especially when you're doing this the first time. You definitely want to try on something that you don't care much about. I've done this quite a bit on little things, and this is really no different. And I have got a little crazy with the tool where it's hit a few other things, but nothing damaging. So I guess if you look at this stand, you can see where my mark is at, and it's kind of at an angle somewhat, but it's getting a little wider toward the right hand side at the top than it is at the bottom. So I'm probably gonna have to clearance it there the most, but we're getting there slowly but surely. So I'll get back with you when I finally get it clearanced, and then and show you what we have. Okay, we finally made some progress here in the right direction. I got it all the way up against the capture device for the rocker shaft, and this is a 10 thousandths feeler gauge here, and I can actually get that in there. It starts to tighten up, but it's also at an angle, and it's not pretty much a flat surface. So I would have to say we're at 10 thousandths clearance, or maybe a little bit greater. It only took 2 or 3 more times after I initially shut it off. Now we'll move on to the next set of rockers, or the next rocker stand, and see what we got to compete with there.
4 hours later.
Okay, I finally finished with those rocker stands, and it took me about 4 times longer than what I thought it was going to take. But I'll give you the rundown. Let me flip this around, and I'll give you the show. Okay, here's the cylinder head. I just finished it up, and I cleaned it all up after I just got done. If you notice that one rocker stand here is completely, this is how the factory did it. I didn't touch this side. It still has the Gliptol on it that was originally on there. So it's very off-centered, like, you know, originally like the one we had started on, which was number 8. So here is the finished side on number 8. And that's the one I had a heck of a time getting clearance on. And I did find out that the capture devices had a little bit of slop in them, so every time I put them on, it was off to a different side, which changed the tolerance on it every time. It made me look a little foolish, but you know, once I figured that out, it was fine. Not a big deal. Okay, so then we move on to the second stand. I actually had to grind on this side, as you can see, clearance this side here, and this side as well. So it seems like all the forward ones needed more clearance than the aft ones, but they're all pretty much the same. If you look at number 4 here, it's quite a bit actually on number 4. On this side was the same way, where it needed more clearance than what I originally thought it was going to need, but got it all smoothed up. Used a lot more materials than what I thought it was going to take. Just like based on, you know, originally what I thought was it was only going to be one rocker stand. So I thought this was going to be quick and easy, but it ended up taking me a better part of the whole day to get it done. So as you can see, the last one I did here, I took it quite a bit off and had to smooth it all up, but they're done. So now I can start reassembly of the cylinder head, bolt it back on the block. I'm waiting on springs and retainers. I am going to change them over to beehive style springs so they have more clearance between the base of the rocker arm and the top of the valve, the retainer, and the spring. So that way the T&Ds will essentially bolt right on whenever I find the finances to do that. They're not cheap. Other than that, though, it really took me like 4.5 hours to do all this. I am gonna clean them up a little bit more. I do have to paint the Gliptol back on these edges, and then I'll wait for the new parts to come in and we'll reassemble. So there's the first one done. I still got to do the second one the exact same way, so I'm sure that's going to take 2 days. But if you have any questions or comments or concerns, leave them below. Don't forget to click subscribe and ring the bell so that you get notified every time I post a new video up. I try to do one every day. This one should have been up at 5 o'clock in the morning. That's what I normally post them. But the biggest problem with that was I had so much work to do to get these things apart, disassembled, cleaned up, everything kind of set up to go ahead and modify the rocker stand. So it took me a little longer than what I thought it was going to, but doesn't it always? All right, well, till next time, see you tomorrow.